The crystal glass shattered against the marble floor of Rossi's, Chicago's most exclusive Italian restaurant, and the entire room froze. Every head turned. Every breath stopped. Lake's hands trembled as she stared at the broken pieces, her apron soaked with expensive red wine. But it wasn't the glass that made her heart stop. It was the man sitting at the corner table, watching her with eyes so dark they seemed to swallow light itself. Lorenzo Moretti didn't just own Rossi's. He owned half of Chicago. Whispers followed him like shadows. People disappeared when he snapped his fingers. Rivals learned to fear the sound of his name. And right now, those terrifying eyes were locked on her. "I'm so sorry, Lake started, but the words died in her throat. He stood up slowly, his tailored black suit moving like liquid darkness. Every bodyguard in the restaurant tensed. The other diners held their breath. He was walking toward her. She had no idea that in exactly 48 hours, she would be the only person in the world who could make Lorenzo Moretti, the untouchable, the cold, the merciless, actually laugh. She had no idea that her clumsiness would crack open a heart that had been sealed shut for 15 years. She had no idea that love was about to choose her, to follow Lake's incredible journey and discover how a simple waitress melted the heart of Chicago's most dangerous man. Join our community right now. We're working hard to reach 5,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to us. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's grow together. Lake had been working at Rossi's for 3 months, and in those 3 months she'd learned one crucial rule: stay invisible. The restaurant was a cathedral of wealth. Soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white linen, wine bottles that cost more than her monthly rent. The clientele were Chicago's elite: CEOs, politicians, celebrities. And then there were the others, the men in expensive suits who didn't smile, who spoke in low voices, whose presence made the air feel heavier. She'd learned to recognize them, the way they moved, the way others moved around them. Lorenzo Moretti was different. He didn't just command respect, he commanded the very fabric of reality around him. When he entered Rossi's, it was like the universe shifted on its axis. Lake had seen him exactly 4 times in 3 months. Each time she'd made sure to be in the kitchen. Each time she'd felt his presence like a physical force even through the walls. But tonight she was covering for Maria, who'd called in sick. Tonight she couldn't hide. "Table 7 needs water," Marco, the head waiter, said, not looking at her. "And don't—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "Just be careful." Lake nodded, understanding immediately. Table 7 was his table, the corner booth, the one where Lorenzo Moretti sat with 2 men in dark suits, their conversation too quiet to hear, but their body language screaming danger. She grabbed the water pitcher with both hands, steadying her breathing. Just water, in and out, professional, invisible. She was halfway across the dining room when her heel caught on the edge of the carpet. Time seemed to slow down. The pitcher tilted, water sloshed. She overcorrected, her other foot sliding, and suddenly she was stumbling forward like a newborn fawn, her arms windmilling, the pitcher flying from her hands. The crash of the glass hitting the marble floor echoed through the entire restaurant like a gunshot. Lake froze, her face burning. Every eye was on her. Every conversation had stopped. The silence was suffocating. And then she felt it, that presence, that weight, that darkness. Lorenzo Moretti was standing up. He moved with the kind of grace that shouldn't exist in a man his size. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from stone by an artist who understood both beauty and danger. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that made Lake's breath catch. They were the color of a winter storm, cold and penetrating, like he could see straight through to her soul. He was walking toward her. Lake's instinct was to run, to apologize, to disappear into the kitchen and never come back. But she was frozen, pinned by those eyes like a butterfly on a board. "I'm so sorry, she started, her voice barely a whisper. He stopped in front of her. Up close, he was even more intimidating. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark like leather and smoke. She could see the faint scar on his left temple. She could see the way his suit was tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been painted onto his body. "What's your name?" His voice was low, smooth, with just the faintest accent underneath. "Italian, maybe, or something else entirely." Lake, she stammered. I'm so sorry about the glass. I'll pay for it. I can... Lake. He said her name like he was tasting it, testing it on his tongue. His eyes moved over her face, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like she was being X-rayed. That's an unusual name. My parents were creative, she said, then immediately regretted it. What was she doing? Making small talk with a man who probably had people killed for looking at him wrong? But then something unexpected happened. The corner of his mouth twitched. It was barely perceptible, just the smallest movement, but Lake saw it. She saw it because she was staring at him like he was the most fascinating thing she'd ever encountered. Creative, he repeated, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like amusement. I like that. He turned to Marco, who had appeared at Lake's side like a ghost. Have someone clean this up, and bring her a new pitcher. Then he looked back at Lake. You're going to finish serving my table, carefully. It wasn't a request. Lake nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. She grabbed the new pitcher from Marco's trembling hands and followed Lorenzo back to his table, acutely aware of every eye in the restaurant tracking their movement. As she poured water into his glass with exaggerated care, she noticed something she hadn't expected. His hands were scarred. Not dramatically, but there were thin white lines across his knuckles, the kind of scars that came from violence, from fighting, from a life lived in the shadows. You're new, he said, not looking at her. He was back in his seat now, his companions watching with expressions that ranged from confused to terrified. 3 months, Lake confirmed, her voice steadier now. I'm still learning. You're clumsy, he said. Very, she agreed, surprising herself with her honesty. This time, she definitely saw it. A smile, brief, barely there, but real. That's refreshing. She didn't understand what he meant. She didn't understand any of this. But as she walked away from his table, she felt his eyes on her back, and she knew with absolute certainty that something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed in the universe. She had no idea how right she was. For the next 2 weeks, Lake worked every shift she could get at Rossi's. She told herself it was because she needed the money. But the truth was more complicated. The truth was that she was waiting for something. Waiting for him. Lorenzo came to Rossi's 3 times a week, always the same table, always with different companions. Lake tried not to notice. She tried not to care. But she did notice. She noticed everything. She noticed that he always ordered the same thing, grilled branzino with lemon and olive oil, nothing else. She noticed that he never smiled at anyone except occasionally at Marco. She noticed that he had a habit of checking his phone every few minutes, his expression growing darker each time. She noticed that he watched her, not in a creepy way, not in a way that made her feel unsafe. It was more like observation, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve, like she was interesting to him in a way that confused her completely. Lake had grown up poor. Her father had left when she was 5. Her mother worked 2 jobs and still barely made rent. Lake had learned early that the world wasn't kind to people like her. The world was for people with money, with connections, with power. Lorenzo Moretti had all 3, and he kept looking at her like she mattered. It was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. The other waiters whispered about him when they thought she couldn't hear. Moretti's dangerous. Stay away from Moretti. He's killed people. Lake didn't know if any of it was true, but she knew enough to be careful. She wasn't careful enough. It was a Thursday night when she felt a hand on her elbow, gentle but firm. She turned to find Lorenzo standing beside her, and her heart nearly stopped. Walk with me, he said. It wasn't a request. I'm working, Lake said, but she was already setting down her tray. Not anymore. Not tonight. He led her through the kitchen, where every chef suddenly became very interested in their cooking, and out through the back door into the cool Chicago night. The alley behind Rossi's was narrow and dark, lit only by the glow of the city beyond. You're wondering why I asked you to come with me, he said, not turning around. He was looking up at the sky, at the stars that were barely visible through the city's light pollution. Yes, Lake admitted. I'm wondering why I asked you to come with me, he said. I don't usually do things like this. I don't usually deviate from my routine. Why are you telling me this? Lake asked. He finally turned to look at her, and in the darkness his eyes looked almost gentle, almost human. Because you're different. Because you don't know who I am, and even if you did, you wouldn't care. Because you're the only person in Chicago who's ever made me feel like I'm not a monster. Lake's breath caught. You're not a monster. You don't know that. he said quietly. I know enough, she said, surprising herself with her courage. I know that you let me keep my job after I broke your glass. I know that you're kind to the staff. I know that you have scars on your hands that tell a story you don't want to talk about. I know that you're lonely. He flinched at that last word, like she'd hit him. My name is Lorenzo, he said, and it felt like a confession. Lorenzo Moretti, and I'm about to tell you something that's going to change everything. Lake waited, her heart pounding. I want to know you, he said. Not as a waitress, not as someone who works in my restaurant. I want to know Lake, the real Lake. The one who's clumsy and brave and honest in a way that terrifies me. Why? Lake whispered. Because, he said, stepping closer, I've spent 15 years building an empire. I've spent 15 years being cold, being untouchable, being everything that people fear. And then you walked into my restaurant and broke a glass, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt something. I felt alive. Lake should have been scared. She should have run. But instead, she found herself asking, what do you want from me? A chance, he said simply. Just a chance to know you, to see if what I'm feeling is real, or if it's just the novelty of something different. And if it's not real, Lake asked. Then I'll let you go, he said, and you'll never have to see me again. Lake knew she should say no. She knew this was dangerous, but she also knew that she'd been waiting for something her whole life. She'd been waiting for someone to see her. Really see her. Okay, she said softly. One chance. He smiled then, and it transformed his entire face. It made him look younger, less dangerous, more human. Thank you, he said, and he meant it. Their first real date was at a private rooftop overlooking Lake Michigan. Lorenzo had sent a car for her, a sleek black Mercedes that made her neighbors stare. He'd arranged everything, a table set with candles, champagne that cost more than her rent, food prepared by a private chef. It was the most romantic thing that had ever happened to her, but what made it special wasn't the luxury. It was him. He asked her questions, real questions, about her childhood, her dreams, her fears. He listened like her answers actually mattered. He told her stories about growing up in Chicago, about his family, about the moment he realized he had to choose between being good and being powerful. I chose power, he said, and there was no apology in his voice. I don't regret it, but I also don't expect you to understand it. I understand more than you think, Lake said. I understand what it's like to do things you're not proud of because you have to survive. He looked at her then with an expression she couldn't quite read. What do you mean? Lake hesitated. She'd been keeping this secret for so long, and now, sitting across from him under the stars, it felt like the right moment to tell him. When I was 18, she said slowly, I had an opportunity. A man offered me money, a lot of money. He said all I had to do was deliver some packages. I didn't ask what was in them. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but she felt the shift in the air between them. I did it 3 times, Lake continued, and then I realized what I was doing. I realized that I was becoming someone I didn't want to be, so I stopped. I gave the money back. I got a job at Rossi's, and I've been trying to be better ever since. Why are you telling me this? Lorenzo asked quietly. Because you deserve to know who I really am, Lake said. Because if this is going to be real, it has to be real, all of it, the good and the bad. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. I appreciate your honesty, he said, but I need to tell you something too. Lake's stomach dropped. This was it. This was the moment where he revealed that he was dangerous, that he was involved in things she couldn't even imagine, that they could never be together. I'm not just a businessman, he said. I'm sure you've heard rumors. I'm sure you know that people don't get to where I am by being honest. Lake nodded slowly. But here's what you need to understand, he continued. Everything I've done to build something, to create something that matters, and I've done it all alone. I've never let anyone close enough to matter, until you. Lorenzo, Lake started, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, he said. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand what you're getting into. If you're with me, you're with someone who has enemies. You're with someone who's made choices that can't be unmade. You're with someone who's dangerous. I know, Lake said quietly. Do you? He asked, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. Do you really understand what that means? It means that being with me puts you at risk. It means that there are people who would hurt you just to hurt me. It means that your life will never be simple again. Lake thought about her life before Lorenzo. She thought about the small apartment, the endless shifts at the restaurant, the feeling of being invisible. She thought about how empty it all was. "I don't want simple," she said. "I want real. I want someone who sees me. I want someone who makes me feel alive. And that's you." He pulled her across the table and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and intense, and full of all the longing that had been building between them since the moment she'd broken that glass. It tasted like champagne and promise and the kind of love that changes everything. When they pulled apart, Lorenzo was shaking. "I'm going to protect you," he said fiercely. "I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to—" "I know," Lake said, and she kissed him again. 3 weeks into their relationship, everything fell apart. Lake was at Lorenzo's penthouse, a sprawling space that overlooked the entire city, when his phone rang. She watched his face change as he listened to whoever was on the other end, watched the tenderness drain away, replaced by something cold and lethal. "I'll handle it," he said, and hung up. "What's wrong?" Lake asked, though she already knew the answer. She could feel it in the air. "Russo," he said, and the name sounded like a curse. "My rival. He's making a move. He's trying to take over my territory." Lake's heart sank. This was the part she'd been dreading, the part where his world collided with hers. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "What I have to do," he said, and he wouldn't look at her. For the next week, Lorenzo was consumed. He was gone most of the time, and when he was home he was distant, distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. Lake tried to be understanding, but fear was eating her alive. Fear that he was going to get hurt. Fear that he was going to do something that would take him away from her forever. And then one night she overheard a conversation. She'd come to his penthouse unannounced, wanting to surprise him. She found him in his office with Marco and another man she didn't recognize. They were talking in low voices, but she heard enough. "The girl," the man was saying. "Use her as leverage. Russo won't know what hit him." Lake's blood turned to ice. "No," Lorenzo said flatly. "Lake is off limits. She's not part of this. Boss, if we could just—" "I said no," Lorenzo snapped. "If anyone touches her, if anyone even looks at her wrong, I will burn this entire city to the ground. Do you understand me?" Lake backed away from the door, her heart pounding. She understood now. She understood that being with Lorenzo meant being a target. She understood that her presence in his life could be used against him. She made a decision. The next morning, she left him a note. "I can't do this. I can't be the reason you lose everything. I'm sorry." She quit her job at Rossi's. She packed a bag. She was going to disappear, to remove herself from his life, to protect him from the danger that her presence created. She made it as far as the airport. She was standing in line at the ticket counter when a hand grabbed her arm. She turned to find Lorenzo, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was rumpled. His jaw was dark with stubble. His eyes were wild. "Don't," he said simply. "You don't understand," Lake said, trying to pull away. "I heard what they said. I heard that I could be used against you. I can't—" "You think I don't know that?" he said, and his voice was raw. "You think I haven't thought about it. Lake, I've spent my entire life protecting myself, by not caring about anything, by not letting anyone matter. And then you came along, and you mattered so much that I can't think straight." People were staring at them now, but Lorenzo didn't seem to care. "I'm not going to use you as leverage," he continued, "and I'm not going to let Russo use you either. Because you know what I realized. I realized that losing you would be worse than losing everything else. I realized that you're the only thing that matters." "Lorenzo," Lake started, but he cut her off. "I've already handled Russo," he said. "It's done. He's not a threat anymore. And I've made it very clear to everyone in my organization that you are untouchable, that you are mine to protect, and anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me." "How did you—" Lake began. "I have resources," he said simply, "and I have people who are very good at making problems disappear. Russo was a problem. He's gone now." Lake didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know, but she understood that Lorenzo had done something significant, something that had probably involved violence or threats or things she didn't want to think about, and she realized that she didn't care. She cared about him. She cared about the way he was looking at her, like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to humanity. She cared about the fact that he'd chosen her over his empire, over his power, over everything he'd built. "Take me home," she said. He kissed her right there in the airport in front of everyone, and it was a declaration. It was a promise. It was a statement that said, "This woman is mine, and I will burn the world down before I let her go." The penthouse was quiet when they arrived. Lorenzo led Lake to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Chicago spread out beneath them like a kingdom, all lights and possibility and danger. "I need to ask you something," he said, and his voice was different now, softer, more vulnerable. "And I need you to answer honestly." Lake waited. "Do you love me?" he asked. "Not because I'm powerful, not because I can give you things, not because I'm dangerous or exciting. Do you love me? The real me? The man who's scared that he's going to lose you? The man who spent 15 years being cold because he was afraid of feeling anything?" Lake thought about the question. She thought about the moment she'd broken that glass, and he'd stood up. She thought about the rooftop under the stars. She thought about the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Yes," she said. "I love you." He pulled her close, and she could feel him shaking. "I love you too," he said. "I love you so much that it terrifies me. I love you so much that I would do anything for you. I love you so much that I'm willing to change, to be better, to be the kind of man who deserves you." "You already are," Lake said. "No," he said, pulling back to look at her. "I'm not, but I'm going to be. I'm going to step back from the business. I'm going to let someone else run things. I'm going to build a life with you that's real. That's not built on fear or violence or power." Lake's eyes widened. "Lorenzo, you don't have to." "I want to," he said. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to take you to dinner without worrying about who's watching. I want to build something with you that's just ours, something beautiful and real and good." "What about your empire?" Lake asked. "It's not an empire," he said. "It's a prison, and I'm done being imprisoned." Over the next few months, Lorenzo made good on his promise. He stepped back from his business operations, handing control to a trusted lieutenant. He sold off properties. He liquidated assets. He systematically dismantled the empire he'd spent 15 years building, and with each piece he let go, he seemed lighter, freer, more human. Lake watched the transformation with wonder. She watched as the cold, untouchable man she'd first met slowly became someone warmer, someone capable of laughing at her jokes, someone who could be vulnerable without losing his strength. They didn't move in together immediately. Lorenzo wanted to do things right. He wanted to court her properly, to build something that wasn't rushed or desperate. So they went on dates, real dates. They went to museums and restaurants and took walks along the lake. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. And slowly Lake realized something. She wasn't just falling in love with Lorenzo. She was falling in love with the man he was becoming, the man he was choosing to be. One evening, about 4 months after they'd met, Lorenzo took her back to the rooftop where they'd had their first real date. "I have something to tell you," he said, and Lake's heart jumped. She thought he was going to propose, and she was already mentally preparing herself to say yes. But instead he said, "I've been offered a job, a legitimate job, running a hotel development company. It's boring and corporate and completely legal, and I want to take it." Lake laughed. "That's what you wanted to tell me." "I wanted to tell you because I wanted to ask if you'd be okay with it," he said. "I wanted to ask if you'd be okay with me being boring, with me being normal, with me being just a regular guy who loves you." "I would love that," Lake said, and she meant it. He took her hand and placed something in her palm. It was a key. "What's this?" Lake asked. "A key to a house," he said. "Not a penthouse, not a mansion, a real house, in a real neighborhood, with a backyard and a kitchen and room for us to build a life. I want you to see it. I want you to tell me if you like it. And if you do, I want you to move in with me, not because I'm powerful or dangerous or rich, but because you love me and I love you and we want to see where this goes." Lake looked at the key in her hand, and tears started streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it." He kissed her then, and it was different from all the other kisses. It was calmer, deeper, more certain. It was the kiss of a man who'd finally found what he was looking for. It was the kiss of a man who'd chosen love over power, vulnerability over strength, connection over isolation. It was the kiss of a man who was finally, truly alive. 6 months later, Lake stood in the kitchen of their house, their real house, with its white picket fence and its garden and its normal, beautiful ordinariness, and she couldn't stop smiling. Lorenzo was in the living room, on a video call with his new company. He was wearing a button-down shirt instead of a suit, and he was laughing about something someone had said. The sound of his laugh still made her heart skip, but now it was different. It was lighter, freer. It was the laugh of a man who'd finally learned how to be happy. She'd quit her job at Rossi's, but not because she had to. She'd quit because she wanted to. She was taking classes now, working toward a degree in hospitality management. Lorenzo had offered to pay for it, but Lake had insisted on working part-time at a local cafe to help. She needed to know that she was building her own life, not just living in his shadow. The transformation had been gradual, but it was real. Lorenzo still had his edges. He was still intense, still protective, still capable of being dangerous when he needed to be. But he was also kind now, gentle. He was learning how to be soft without losing his strength. And Lake had changed too. She was more confident now, more sure of herself. She'd learned that love didn't mean losing yourself. It meant finding someone who loved all of you, the clumsy parts, the brave parts, the broken parts. She brought him tea while he was on his call, and he smiled at her in a way that made her feel like the most important person in the world, because to him, she was. As she watched him work, Lake thought about the moment she'd broken that glass. She thought about how one small accident had changed everything, how sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, with exactly the person you need to be with. She thought about how love doesn't choose based on class or power or status. It chooses based on something deeper, something true. And she was grateful. Grateful for the broken glass, grateful for the clumsy waitress she was, grateful for the cold man who'd learned how to feel, grateful for the chance to love and be loved in return. This incredible journey has come to an end, but Lake and Lorenzo's story will stay with you. If this tale touched your heart in any way, please hit that like button and share it with someone who believes in the power of love to transform us. Your support helps us create more stories like this one. Subscribe now so you don't miss our next emotional journey. Thank you for being part of this beautiful story. Until next time.